The Soldiers of Ares. Chapter 22. He got off the floor and checked out the window. There was still no sign of light outside. He wondered who was knocking at his door at this hour. He went to check and saw Achilles standing there. He was already in his armor, and, as always, his sword was with him. "Get ready," he said. Maximus was still half asleep. He said, "What time is it?" 4:30, Achilles said. "Your training starts at 5. Meet me on floor -27. There's a private gym there big enough for us to practice. Don't be late." He said this and went to the elevator. Maximus was used to getting up early while he was in the army. But this was ridiculous. Even in the army, you only had to get up at 6. But the sword training was his need, so he really did not have a voice to complain. He got ready fast, and soon he was out of his room with his sword, wearing his leather armor. Well, it couldn't exactly be called armor. Basically, it just consisted of a thick brown leather chest plate, a pair of leather gloves, his combat boots, and an arm guard he had made himself. It wasn't much, but it was all he could afford. He went over to the elevator and pressed the button for floor -27. Once he reached there, the gym wasn't hard to find, since it took up most of the floor. Maximus went inside to find Achilles already waiting for him. The gym itself was mostly empty. It had some basic training equipment like weights, dumbbells, and a treadmill on one side. And on the other wall were a bunch of basic melee weapons such as swords, spears, and hammers. There were also a few closets and a huge garage door on one side. Other than this, the room was empty, and all this open space was perfect for sword training. "Shall we begin?" Achilles asked, and Maximus nodded. "Then put away your sword," Achilles said. Maximus was a bit confused. "Don't I need my sword for the training?" "Not right now. First you start with basic exercise. You were in the army, you know the drill. Push-ups, sit-ups, the works," Achilles said. Maximus nodded. He hadn't done any of that since he left the army, but he was sure he could still manage it. He was about to remove his armor when Achilles said, "Leave it on. It will help you to be used to their weight in a fight." Maximus nodded and began. After a few hours he realized that he was wrong. He was not nearly in the shape he was when he left the army, and he could just do half the number of push-ups as before. The extra weight of his leather wasn't helping. Achilles was training too, but he was doing all-out sword combos instead of exercise. Maximus couldn't help but admire the flow at which he used his blade. It was like an extension of his arm, and it moved precisely according to his will. His face showed complete focus, his eyes unwavering below the scar on his forehead. After another hour or so, Maximus was sweating and on the floor. He had no idea his stamina had taken such a beating. Between the lack of training and the inadequate amounts of food in the trenches, his body was nowhere near his old form. Achilles sheathed his blade and came over, and he was barely sweating. Maximus was still on the floor, and Achilles said, "That's enough for now. We shall continue after breakfast." Maximus removed his armor and left it at the gym. Achilles merely taped his locket again, and the armor of sticks disappeared. They went off to the elevator after that. They stepped in and went back up to the dining hall. "Why leather? Metal armor is always best for a swordsman. And if you wanted dexterity, there's always Kevlar," Achilles asked once inside the elevator. "Trust me, it wasn't by choice," Maximus said. "I used to use metal armor while in the army, but they didn't exactly let you keep any equipment once you left. So I just salvaged whatever I got." Achilles just nodded, and the elevator reached their floor. When they entered the dining hall, Ajax and Hedger were already there, but there was no sign of Rex. Hedger was munching on an apple, and Ajax had already finished his breakfast and was reading a newspaper. The newspaper was called The Flying Times. It was one of the largest newspapers in the world and was owned by the company Swiftfoot, Hermes' company. "Wow, you look like you just climbed Mount Etna," Hedger said as he saw Maximus. Maximus was still panting a bit as he sat down, and his clothes were drenched with sweat. There was an amazing spread for breakfast as usual, but the only thing he wanted right then was some water. He chugged down an entire bottle before he spoke. "Was training with Achilles," he said, finally catching his breath. Ajax put down his paper and said, "Well, Achilles taking someone under his wing, that's a first. Your old master would be so proud." Achilles just smirked and said, "I doubt anything I do would please that old geezer," and Ajax laughed at this. "So, anything worth reading in that?" Achilles said, looking at the newspaper. "Just the usual horse manure. No real update on the war either, if that's what you were asking," Ajax said. Achilles nodded and said, "And I guess Hermes still hasn't mentioned that I'm still alive either." "That's for sure. I mean, even Ares still doesn't know." Maximus just remembered that he had not told them about the latest vision yet. So he began to explain, and once he had finished, Hedger said, "So you're saying that there's somebody behind Ares pulling the strings on Daedalus being kidnapped. But who would Ares take orders from?" Achilles thought for a moment and said, "The highest possibility is one of the other gods. And judging by the way Ares acted, it sounds like one of the big three. The big three consisted of three of the most powerful gods in the entire world, the three brothers who had ushered in the era of the gods themselves, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. All three were emperors of vast and powerful nations that held more influence than most other countries combined. Achilles was right about one thing. Even Ares would have to cower before their might. Isn't there any other god who has that kind of influence? Hedger asked. Maybe Queen Hera would be, since she is the wife of Zeus and all, but Maximus confirmed it was a man's voice, Achilles said. Now let's not jump to any conclusions here, Ajax said. After all, there is another group of creatures that might be just as powerful. Everyone looked at him and Achilles asked, "Are you referring to the Titans?" "Wait, hold on a sec. I thought all the Titans were locked up in Tartarus in deep slumber," Maximus asked. "Most are, but not all. Some still roam free, hiding away from the gods. They are still out there waiting for a chance to free their brethren and bring forth the Titan age once again," Achilles said. The thought of some horrifically powerful Titan roaming free, plotting to take over the world, didn't exactly put his mind at ease. They all sat there in silence for a while, until Ajax finally said, "Well, sitting here and staring at the ground is not going to solve our mystery. Besides, with fixing up your truck and my regular duties as champion, I got a full plate already. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going off to work now." With that, Ajax got up and left. Achilles turned to Maximus and said, "We should get back to training as well." Maximus was still kind of tired, but he agreed to his new teacher. "What about you, Hedger? Do you wish to join us?" Achilles asked. "Me, nah. Training's not really my thing, you know. Besides, I heard that this place has a huge game room on the 22nd floor. I think I'll just chill there for a while." With that, Achilles and Maximus left for their gym again. On their way back, Maximus asked, "By the way, how come Hermes still hasn't told Ares that you're alive and the one who rescued Daedalus?" "Because Hermes doesn't give away anything for free, especially information. And right now, knowledge of me being alive seems to be quite valuable. So he's probably going to hold on to it." They had reached the gym again, and Maximus went ahead to put his leather armor on again. Achilles went ahead and took a seat. He then took out his lighter, flicking it open and shut. "All right, now draw your sword and show me what you got," he said. Maximus drew his sword and waited. Usually, when he practiced, he had something to hit, like a tree or a dummy while in the army. But he saw nothing like that here, and he felt that swinging his sword around in the air would just make him look like a moron. "Is there something I can hit in here?" he asked. Achilles pointed to a closet behind them, and Maximus went ahead to check what was in it. Inside, he found an automaton. It was standing on 4 wheels, but from there on up it was designed like a human. It even had a wooden sword in one hand and a shield on the other. It was also wearing a bike helmet on its head. It was like a high-tech practice dummy. He pushed the automaton to the center of the room. Once it was in place, Achilles gave him the word to strike. Maximus drew his sword and went to work on the automaton. His first shots were weak, but once he got into his form, his swings became more precise and stronger. He was afraid that the robot might break, but it seemed to be made for taking a real high amount of damage. After a few sword combinations, Achilles told him to stop. Then he said, "That was good, but now let's try with the automaton being active, shall we?" He went up to the robot and pressed a button on its back. The eyes of the automaton lit up red, and it readied its sword and shield for a fight. Achilles then said, "Now this is a practice device, so it's used to taking a lot of damage, so don't worry about going all out. Also, these practice bots have 10 levels of difficulty. Now, 1 and 2 are too easy and all they really do is block. So I'm going to start you off with level 3. He then went ahead to return to his seat, leaving Maximus to fight against the automaton. It was much harder to hit something that hit back, and Maximus knew this well, but he still managed to fend off the attacks pretty well. This went on for a while, and Maximus didn't really have any trouble against the bot, though he was starting to get tired again, and the robot didn't seem to have that problem as it ran on batteries. Finally, it was lunchtime when they stopped, but they didn't go up to the dining hall for their food. Instead, Achilles had one of the butler bots bring a couple of burgers to their gym. "It seems I underestimated you. You're handling level 3 with no trouble." "I think we should put it up to 5 after lunch," Achilles said while they ate. Maximus nodded to this and took a bite from his burger. The fight had made him really hungry. "But you still don't seem to be any closer to unlocking the blade's true potential." This was true. Even though he was getting well practiced with the blade, he still had no idea on how to make the red glow come out. "It looks as if I can't control it when this thing lights up at will." "Have patience," Achilles said. "After the next few rounds, we will try some focusing techniques to help improve your willpower. That should also help you to control your sword." They started the training again, only this time with the automaton at level 5. The robot was much faster now, and it blocked a lot more of Max's attacks. This went on for a while until he got too tired to keep fighting. He just couldn't keep up with the machine anymore. He was beginning to lose focus, and he let his guard down. The automaton nearly got a shot right on his head, but luckily Achilles stepped in and blocked it. He switched off the practice bot while Maximus sat on the ground exhausted. "You're focusing too much on your sword. Every move you make is based on it," Achilles said. "I'm a swordsman. What else am I supposed to focus on?" Maximus asked, barely able to talk between panting for air. "It is true that your sword is an important weapon, but you keep forgetting that the swordsman is an important weapon too. It is possible to win with a weaker sword against a more powerful one if you are the better swordsman." Maybe it was the lack of water in his system right then, but Maximus was not getting a word he was saying. Achilles must have figured this out because he then said, "Perhaps it would be better if I showed you." Achilles got up but left his sword on his seat. He then went ahead to pick up a wooden sword from the back wall. Maximus cleared the field to see his teacher in action. Achilles walked up to the practice spot and turned the level up to 10, the last level. He then switched it on, and its eyes began glowing red again. The practice spot was moving at a ridiculous speed now, and Maximus could barely keep up with it. He was sure that if he had been the one fighting the robot now, he would have been on the ground with a broken arm. But not Achilles. It was amazing how he was able to evade all of the bot's attacks and look so refined while doing it. "You see, I don't even need to use my sword now, as long as I'm able to use my body correctly," he said while still coolly avoiding the attacks. After a minute, Achilles stepped back somewhat and the automaton raised its sword for another attack. But the bot was too slow. With a swift strike with his wooden sword, Achilles made contact with its head. The head came straight off and rolled on the ground with its helmet broken and lying on the side. Well, at least Maximus had learned one thing today, and that was to never challenge Achilles to a sword fight, even if he was only going to use a broken twig as his weapon. "I think that's enough swordplay for today. Now let's try to get your focus in tune," Achilles said. They continued to a type of meditation, and Achilles kept talking about how he was supposed to visualize his energy blending with his sword. Maximus had no idea what he was talking about. He just sat there staring at the sword, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. After a while, he began to feel stupid, but he wasn't complaining. At least he wasn't sweating it out with the practice bot anymore. Time passed, and finally Achilles said, "That's enough for today. We will continue with it tomorrow. Besides, it's almost time Daedalus got up again. We already missed him this morning, and I still haven't told him about your latest vision." They packed up their things and headed off to their rooms. Maximus took a shower, and it was only when the water hit him that he realized how much his muscles were aching. This has been a chapter from Book 1 of the new World Odyssey series, The Soldiers of Ares. Links to the books in the bio. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next chapter.